And we make these connections in different ways, and I think the easiest way to explore what essentially is quite a complex idea is through our kind of key words. So our first key words are dreamland. Dreamland is something that runs all the way through our walk, and we talk about this idea of a kind of dreamland, mediascape, dreamscape, but also a spaces of aspiration, spaces of dreams. And these spaces are the spaces that link, in our minds, Whitechapel and Los Angeles. Talking of time, the second kind of key term for us is time travel. We're moving through historic time to the present, to the future. We'll move right between these different kind of moments of experience. The third kind of key term for us is parallel urbanisms. And again, it's this idea of interconnected cities. How does that work in terms of the visible and the visible, the material and the immaterial through infrastructure spaces, but also through these kind of shared imaginaries? How do they connect one another? How have they impacted on one another? And what does it mean in terms of not just shared experience, but our kind of experience of architecture, economics, and essentially politics too?
His way of seeing Whitechapel. So he writes, no more dreary spectacle can be found on this earth than the whole of the, quote, awful East, with its Whitechapel, Hoxton, Spitalfields, Bethnal Green and Wapping to the East India Docks. The colour of life is grey and drab. Everything is helpless, hopeless, unrelieved and dirty. Bathtubs are a thing unknown, as mythical as the ambrosia of the gods. The people themselves are dirty, while any attempt at cleanliness becomes howling farce. When it is not pitiful and tragic, strange, vagrant odours come drifting along the greasy wind, and the rain, when it falls, is more like grease than water from heaven. The very cobblestones are scummed with grease. Here lives a population as dull and unimaginative as its long grey miles of dingy brick. Religion has passed it by, and a gross and stupid materialism reigns, fatal alike to the things of the spirit and the finer instincts of life.
The street is interesting because what we have in front of us is we still have a connection with the people of the abyss. This space here on the left, this building, fairly anonymous building, is a hostel for homeless people. On the right, we have the kind of development space that's kind of branching out from the city. Two different universes, two very different worlds. And in a way, just like Los Angeles, the spaces of Whitechapel are very much zoned. They're zoned into these, what we call these kind of different worlds of experience, activity, and we're going to be talking about that quite a lot. I mean, as Simon was saying before about the different smells, textures, experiences of Angel Alley, as unsavory as they are, they represent something important in terms of the kind of economics of the space. And as we move into the city, we'll have a much more sanitized, a much more cleaner, safer space of surveillance as we go in that direction. The owners of this building, I don't know why, hung on to this little slither, Dreamland. Against all the odds, they must have been offered all sorts of cash to be part of this development or to sell the land for this development, but they refused, and there was this refusal that I can only kind of imagine is based on a kind of stubbornness to change, to carry on dreaming about what Whitechapel might be. In terms of Dreamland and La La Land and LA and the relationship to media space, it's sort of interesting to think of film sets. And I think of this space as a kind of facade, a surface, much like these other buildings here. And like I said, This space here was completely flattened and rebuilt as apartments. And in a way, this is what we have here, these different surfaces right up until the city, which is again a completely different future. So I'll be returning to this idea of a kind of cinematic landscape, a media space, and its impact on the way that Whitechapel can be thought, but also imagined, and how it kind of had an effect on the skyline. We end up over here in the City of London, and although the City of London isn't part of Whitechapel, it's important to really understand the impact of the City of London on Whitechapel.
This is a launching pad of parallel lives, where the dream of coming to London ended up. Queer love in the late 90s. I came here, moved in with another boy in 1996. Two barren bodies hidden inside the children of immigrants, looking for new worlds, new dreams. These are the wrong side of the tracks, the interior spaces. I moved in with his family. His family didn't know. There were parallel worlds of shared imaginaries, migrating to a new world. The term New Life comes from a TV program called Naya Jeevan, Naya Zindagi. It's an amalgamation of a Hindu and a Persian word, which is part of the lingua franca of the subcontinent. And that program is broadcasted into these homes, inside, into these parallel lives, showing them how to acclimatise into their new life. Patience and confidence, and then you make a home. The way you make your home, the item that reminds you of your home. And those that live on the margins, these are the apparatus and its interiors. For them is where you dream from. They're not dream interiors as the world of interiors, but a space to dream from. From the bed you sleep in, food that you cook, food you eat, that is available and it's meaningful.
Over there is the Culpeper, a rather bijou gastropub, and so this top story were sort of rooms that could be rented for the night, and they were very popular with American sailors. What happened in 1940? There was during the Blitz, a bomb dropped from this pub and took out these rooms. And Jack London, I mean, as well as taking in a bit of culture at the Whitechapel Gallery, I know that he would spend time after he'd sort of had a quick rub down and put on some night clothes. He would visit this pub and other pubs and just chat about the old times with his compatriots.
Here was built between 1965 and 1970, over 5 years. It's built by a group of architects. They were employed by local authorities. You may know that architecture used to, especially around the 50s and 60s and pre-war, where local authorities would have an architecture office. And it wasn't so much to do with individuals, celebrities, or signature architects. It was groups of architects, people like Leslie Martin that designed the Royal Festival Hall, or Donald Gilbertson, who was the city planner for Coventry and came up with a whole new design for the city of Coventry following the Blitz. These groups had this aspiration to make architecture for a better future. Middlesex Estate is a dwelling, it's not offices, not like the City of London. In fact, it's probably one of the only estates that sits right next to the City of London. You will notice a few things about it. Like many of these architectural local authority architects, there was a view to kind of really think about modernism. Nicholas Pevsner, the authority of architecture reviews in the 1960s, at the Middlesex estate, complaining that it was too urban, too brutal, and he complained particularly about these, what I think are very interesting balconies. He complained that they were fiddly balconies, wrong use of bricks. Nevertheless, this building became something of a point of inspiration for Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott was working at the RCA. He graduated at the RCA as an MA student in film in 1963. After 1963, you remember this was being built, 65 to 70. He spent quite a lot of time in the East End. This building was an important part of his kind of visual imaginary, his cinematic imaginary. When you watch Blade Runner, remember Blade Runner, set in Los Angeles in November 2019. It's a retro future. We're already past that future. We did stand here once in November 2019. In the film, Decker, the key character, has an apartment. The balcony of his apartment, the outside of his apartment, is an exact replica of Middlesex Estate. Okay? So there's a cinematic imaginary that comes into this idea of a future Los Angeles. A future Los Angeles inspired by the edge of Whitechapel, let's call it, the borders of Whitechapel. I just want you to think about that relation for a moment, because we're talking about these parallel urbanisms, these kind of causal psychic connections, and the mediascape, the media space is key to that. And the influence of Blade Runner, science fiction films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s is key to a generation of architects that are responsible for the skyline that's just over there. So we're going to, in a minute, we're going to go around the corner. I would like you just to consider for a moment what it means to have grown up as an architect with Blade Runner, and how that affects the way that you consider your experimental, aspirational city buildings in the City of London. I'm talking about Norman Foster, I suppose, and in particular the Gherkin, and we know that Norman Foster was a big fan of Blade Runner.
In Whitechapel, he's hard to avoid. There is a fictional sense in which we can imagine a time-travelling Jack, that murderous Jack, not Jack London, as he is being pursued by the writer H.G. Wells from 1880s East London to 1970s Los Angeles. Can you see Los Angeles? In the time-travelling Hollywood fantasy, time after time. With Malcolm McDowell, the British actor, who's famous for his portrait of Alex in A Clockwork Orange, playing H.G. Wells, and his friend, whose name escapes me, but it's something like John Stevenson, is in fact the murderous Jack the Ripper. And H.G. Wells realizes that he's Jack the Ripper, and the time machine is, I think, is in the film is in a museum, possibly the British Museum. And Jack the Ripper realizes that H.G. Wells is onto him, gets in the time machine, and he goes off into the future to Los Angeles, and somehow, I'd have to watch the film again, H.G. Wells joins him. So there we have this sort of fictional imagining of Whitechapel coming to Los Angeles. And that's my Jack. Not my Jack.
We might consider that value of dreaming in cities, because I think that's the causal connection that really is so impactful. You know, what allows us to dream? You know, the cities that allow us to dream. And Los Angeles, Whitechapel to some extent, that have offered the potential for dreaming. And I guess as a group, you know, we might argue this is something we want to kind of keep alive.